Hello and happy Thursday, January the 25th. Welcome to my Kickstarter live stream as well as Facebook. I'm Brian Colin, Creature Curator. And on tonight's episode, I'd like to talk to you all about the book and coins that I have created and that I currently have on Kickstarter. If you have any questions throughout the evening in the chat, please post them to the chat. I will be more than happy to share anything that I can about it. Now, as you can see, if you've tuned in on the previous stream, the walls behind me have come down because I had that for a couple of YouTube streams that I was on, and they were just kind of blocking the rest of my studio space. You will see a couple of my creatures up along the wall, and I have a few others down below that I can pick up to kind of talk through in just a little bit as well. And if there's anybody that is in the chat that has backed the project, thank you very much. We have just broken $6,000, leaving us only 1,000 more to go to get and actually fund the project, which I'm very excited about. I know we're going to get there, and I really hope that we are able to go beyond that and get some of these stretch goals unlocked. So before I actually start talking about any of the stretch goals, I forgot to hit go live on my Facebook stream. So let me jump into that real quick because it is streaming there as well. Let me pop that window open real quick just so that I can see the chat if anybody there. Hey, Melissa. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for backing the project. I hope all is going well with you today. Let me see if I can open up the Facebook one so I see the chat over there. All right. That is all going. Thank you for jumping in, Hunter. So as I was saying, happy Thursday, January the 25th. And we're just going to talk a bit about the project and some of the elements that are in there. Hope you're doing well, Hunter, and I hope you're still sculpting away on your pieces. So like I was saying, we've broken the $6,000 mark, and we are going to be coming up on making that $7,000 goal pretty soon. I'm sure. I'm hoping that it can happen before the weekend is over. It'll allow me to sleep a little easier. But so talking about some of the stretch goals, the very first stretch goal is the $10,000 mark, which is going to open the book up to another 24 pages. And what this is going to allow is hey, Doug, what's happening? Hello, Dino and Morgan. Thanks, everybody, for jumping into the Hangout. Feel free to throw in any questions as we go. I'm more than happy to chat. So, but once we get to that 10,000, that's going to allow more art, some additional photos of some of the creatures, because some of the sculptures, the one photograph just isn't really enough to capture all that there is to tell about them. So with that, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about on tonight's stream, because I had a couple people ask, they weren't really sure what was in the book itself, and they couldn't get a real feel for everything from how I had broken it out on the Kickstarter. So what I was going to say about this is, let me pull this into another window so I can look at this. So the way the book is broken down, it's going to have the introduction, it's going to have the table of contents, but first, before anything else, right on the inside front cover and back and inside back cover is going to be the map of Rebelo, which I'm thrilled about, because I think that is going to just really do. It's really a wonderful piece. I love how well the map turned out. I can't speak highly of it enough, mainly because I didn't do it, so I feel great talking well about it. So, but once you get past the table of contents, it's first going to break into the history of Rebelo. That's spanning a couple of pages where it talks about the different eras of the world, how the gods were created, and how they then populated the world with a bunch of the different species that are there now. Once you go from there, it's then going to go into the fiery pits. And the reason that well, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate you saying that he can, for anybody that is in the Kickstarter chat, he can verify that my work is incredible in person. But so the fiery pits, I wanted that to be the very first region that people see in the book, mainly because that's the region that my son Wyatt really came up with on his own. And almost all the species that are in there were his idea. Inside that the fiery pits region, there's going to be 4 different species that has a page with photos of the creature, and then it's going to have a description. It's going to be not just a physical description, there will be physical characteristics down at the bottom, but there's going to be talk about their societies, kind of how they came to be, where they are, and a good bit about what their culture is like and how they interact with some of the other species in the world. From this, once you get through the fiery pits, then it'll talk about the depths unknown. And the depths unknown is really all of the water that kind of surrounds the giant landmass that is Rebelo. Because of how the current flows around the continent, almost all of the species within Rebelo don't really know what lies outside in the water. There's only going to be one creature currently featured in that section, unless someone from one of the high-level pledges, the $1,300 pledges, that helps collaborate on a creature wants their creature to be from the depths unknown. But there's one creature, and then there's the description of the region and some of the lore that revolves around that area and what the different species believe happens to be in that water. From Depths Unknown, we then go to Merk's Hollow. And Merk's Hollow is really the major city in Rebelo. That's where so much happens. And the city itself has recently been overtaken by outlanders that have come in from a different land that have shipwrecked on Rebelo. And there's been a lot of cultural shift there as they have kind of built on top of the city that was already there. They even changed the name from what was once Crookstooth. There are no species that are just specific to that city because it's more of a melting pot. Where species from all over Rebelo have come and built that city there because it's on one of the main rivers that flows through Rebelo. When you get past that section in the book, it'll then go to the Waiju. And the Waiju is, thank you, Melissa. So if in the Kickstarter chat, Melissa is saying that the designs are so unique, she'd love to see some as plushies or puppets. I would love to see some as puppets too. I don't think I could make plushies, but in my hometown, there is a gentleman that used to work for the Center for Puppetry Arts, and we've talked about collaborating on a project and possibly at least bringing one of my creatures to life to see what it would like actually moving and have that sort of fluid movement that you can't get with my static sculptures. But the Waiju is the desert, and there isn't a whole lot going on the surface of the desert. But down below in the Waiju are these giant tunnels that these huge sandworms have carved out. And when they carve them out, the Sorcias, which are kind of like a mole people, have built cities within there. And they collect the excrement of these giant sandworms and extract the methane from that to then power these giant, almost steampunk-style cities. So in that section of the Waiju, it will not only discuss the cities and the tunnel structure that's under there, but it'll also have 2 of the species from the region. If there's a bunch of people that are new and joining in on Facebook and in the Kickstarter chat, what I'm doing is I'm kind of going through and breaking down the different sections of my creature collection book, because I've been asked by a couple folks what all was in it. And rather than type up a long list and put that on the Kickstarter page, I thought it'd be easier to just kind of talk about it. And if you have any questions along the way about anything that I'm chatting about, throw it in the chat and I will do my best to try and answer it. Melissa, you vote for the cat-like one? Excellent. I see. For the puppet, I could definitely see that. Hey, Sue, how are you? Thank you for joining in. So moving from the Waiju, it then goes over and introduces the Perilous Peaks. The Perilous Peaks are the mountainous region on the western coast of Rebelo. It's one of the main regions that I started focusing on outside of the fiery pits, because that's really where I started to develop some of the storylines of like the Carcathians and the Gray Skrulls and how those species had conflicts. So it'll break down that region, and there is going to be 3 different species from that region in the chapters of the book. After that, it'll go into the Forest of the Dead, talk about how the forest became the Forest of the Dead and what lurks inside, and 2 of the species that currently reside in there. And then contained within the forest, inside the circle of the forest, deep inside is the Valley of Despair, where it talks about that region, and then 3 of the different species that are in there. Now, some of the species not only just live in the Valley of Despair, but then they also then branch out and move into other places. Like the Groblins originated in the Valley of Despair, but there's many of them in Crookstooth, and there's many in the Icy Divide now, and they've kind of branched out. But usually for now, I'm focusing, when I'm talking about a species in that area, focusing really on where they originated from. And from the Valley of Despair, we'll then go and talk about the floating forest, which was ripped up from the ground and is hundreds of feet in the air with roots dangling down, and a class structure that's tiered, much like how they live within the levels of the forest. So from the Coccothralis that live high on the tops of the trees to the Dryadamists that live in shanty towns and the roots that dangle below the surface of the forest. There will be a lot of talk about the class structure and how everyone kind of works together within that smaller society in the bigger picture of Rebelo. So in that floating forest, there's 5 species, because there are so many that I've already created from there, that I really want to focus a lot on that. It's also, it's a very fun one to kind of talk about. Thanks everybody that's been joining in on Facebook. I really appreciate it. I'm just chatting about the book that I'm currently running on Kickstarter and taking pre-orders for. If you have any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to ask. I'm just kind of going through what the different chapters are within the book and talking about what the contents are. And then from there, we're just going to answer any questions you might have about sculptures, the different pieces of the book, and why I'm creating it. Anything, feel free to throw anything into the chat. Once we get through the floating forest, it then goes to the Icy Divide, which is the frozen mountain region on the northeastern side of the country. There's going to be 4 species in the book on there. And then from there, we go down to the southwest area to the Badlands, where there isn't a whole lot that lives there, and most of the creatures that are there are pretty fierce and gnarly. I'll have 3 species in that region. And then we'll go to the Salts, which is along the southern coast, and that's more of a beachy tropical area with 5 species there. Some of the more colorful species, some of the more bird-like species live there. And then the last of the regions is the Marsh, which is more swamp-like, having 3 species broken out in that area. So all of those regions, the history of Rebelo, and then towards the end, I'll break out the Pantheon of Gods. Nelson, the economy in Rebelo. Do any other regions besides Sorcias make a product? So, okay, so Sorcias, they procure methane from the giant sandworms, and they trade that and sell that. I was talking about the floating forest and how there's the different levels of society there. And down on the very bottom are these roots that dangle down. And there's these crystals that grow off of the roots that the Dryadamists harvest. It's almost like they're miners mining these crystals that are highly explosive when hit with metal. And so they mine those, and they get paid, and they get hired by the different species that are higher up the ladder in the actual floating forest to do all of this grunt work. So there's that. There's people there's farmers that harvest different fruits. There's a lot of different fruits along in the Perilous Peaks that as it travels further south and gets closer to the Badlands, the fruit gets more valuable because it gets sweeter, and it fetches a much higher price, but the risk involved in getting that fruit is a lot higher. Those are a couple of things. There's definitely craftsmen, people that build things. There's folks that make different sort of potions and things like that. It's very, very high fantasy. So if you think of things that would be normal trades and jobs in like a high fantasy setting, there's going to be a lot of that aside from things that are region specific. Um, After all of those regions, I'll talk about the Pantheon of Gods, the original god, Credona, and then her children, as well as her sister Girma and her one child, and talk a little bit about how most of the discussion of how they came to be is in the introduction in the history of Rebelo at the very beginning of the book. After the Pantheon of Gods, it then breaks down. Thanks, Nelson, for saying so cool. It then goes into 5 different magical items that have been that are relics within Rebelo. One being the Hammer of Grunthar, which is has always been a favorite of folks when they get to see it. This eye will blink at you every now and again because it has a trapped part of a beast inside of it. There's the Claw of Solil, which was ripped off a giant beast while it was still alive. And there's a couple other fun magic items that are in the world setting. So that's pretty much everything that's going to be contained within the book itself. There's going to be the photos and the stories, and then you can see some of the design. If you look at some of my Facebook or Kickstarter posts, you can see some of the spread layouts. There will be full body illustrations of ones that through the taxidermy you only get to see the top of the head, so that you can really have a better idea of their whole physiology, because a lot of folks didn't really realize that a lot of my creatures are bipedal and they just kind of walk around like normal humans, even if a lot of them are much shorter. I don't know if I've made a lot of the species shorter because I come from short folks, like with both of my parents being right around the 5-foot mark in their prime. So, but a lot of my creatures hang out between 3 to 4 feet in height. Also, when sculpting these creatures, I really wanted them to be life-size. So if I do a little head like this, it's going to seem a little odd if that was like a 7-foot tall creature. So again, if anybody has questions about the book, one of the awesome things you can see on the Kickstarter, if you checked out the Kickstarter early on, I've updated the photography on some of the coins. On one of the coins, the coin that has the Cockathralis, the bird-like creature that lives on the high up area of the floating forest, because I was able to get photos of sample coins that were pulled, and it looks fantastic. The coin set itself is going to be great. Each coin has a different texture on the back of it, and 4 out of the 5 coins have the symbol of Credona, the main god, which is also the C on my hat. It's also the logo for creature curation, and it's also my family sigil now, the Colon family mark. But the other back has an MH on the back for Merk's Hollow. And as I was saying earlier, Merk's Hollow is the main city within Rebelo that was recently renamed for Baron Merk von Horvath, who took over the city as an Outlander. Now, I can't wait to see the rest of the coins because they're really going to be fantastic. The job that Norse Foundry is doing on them is beautiful, especially from taking my digital rendering, then seeing their 3D digital rendering. Hunter has a question in the Facebook chat. Seeing how far you have come since the Carrollton Arts Festival is really awesome and a great inspiration. I'll be contributing on Kickstarter tomorrow. Thank you, Hunter. I really appreciate that. I think we're, once we hit the $7,000 mark and we know that we're funded, it's going to just keep going, and a lot of good things are going to happen. So some of the Kickstarter things that I want to do as we unlock them, as the funds get a little higher. The first one, as I said, I'm going to add more pages because I really want to put as much into this book as possible. After that, one of the things that I'd like to unlock is a map. I've talked really highly about the map that Jared Blando did. I'd like to include one that's folded in half and in half again, that's inserted into the book for anybody that picks up the book, because when I was young, I loved when I'd get like a D&D campaign setting and I'd open it up and then I'd pull out a map and open it as big as I could and put it up on my wall and just be able to see the world a little bit bigger than what's inside the book. So I'd like to have that. Also, for the role-playing folks that are out there, I'd like to convert all the monsters and magic items to D&D 5e, Pathfinder, Fate, and I also had a request today for Dungeon World as well. So if we get enough contributions into that, I'll add that in, not to be something that's actually in the printed book, but that would be a downloadable PDF, because I know not everybody does the role-playing stuff, but for the folks that are out there that do, that would like to throw my creatures into their world, I think, and their campaigns, I think that would be great. There was one other, another stretch goal that I'd love to have is being able to do a deboss in the cover so that it presses down. And if you look at the design of the book and seeing all the flourishes that are in there, have that recessed so that when you actually pull your hand across it, being able to feel those textures, I think would be really fantastic. So I've talked a good bit about what the contents are of the book. If anybody has any questions at this point, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just grab I've got a couple of my sculptures that are just sitting down on the floor from ones that were hanging behind me from some of my YouTube chats that I've had this week. So I thought I'd pick those up, talk a little bit about the sculptures, the process a bit, and then talk about where they might happen to be within the world of Rebelo itself. So right here, I have an Erdverken. And this is one of the species that lives in the Badlands. As you can see, he has 8 eyes in total, for he is always watching and always worried about some of the nasty creatures that might come and try and eat him. These have a harder exterior, almost like rhinoceros skin, that helps protect them from some of the other beasties. And of some of the creatures, I would say about 80% of what I've created so far are sentient species. This, on the other hand, is not. This one is just one of the eaters and just loves to go around and just kind of survive in the Badlands. But I've done the full body illustration. You can go back through either my creature curation Facebook or my Instagram and see some of the full illustrations of that guy, because he kind of walks around on all fours and is a little alien-esque in his movements. One of the first species, not one of the first species, one of the earlier species that I started writing out as far as how the societies worked and how the creatures interacted together were the Groblins. And this guy is one of the Groblins here. And this, Nelson, he was a quadruped, that one. This Groblin, unlike most of the other sculptures, was cast out of resin. I made a silicone mold of that and then poured that out of resin and then painted it. All the bigger ones are all one-of-a-kind pieces. As you can see up along the wall, these 3 are a series of resin cast pieces. That guy, Doralt, king of the Carcathians, was a one-of-a-kind piece. If there's anybody in the chat that hasn't checked out the Kickstarter, please jump over there and take a look when you can. There's links all over all of my social media. Also, the short link would be cant.rip/book. Cantrip is a low-level spell in Dungeons and Dragons, and I bought that URL so I could turn it into a magical URL shortener to be as super nerdy as I could. If anybody has any questions about anything that I'm doing or anything about the world of Rebelo, please throw them into the comments, either on the Kickstarter or on the Facebook. So let's see. For anybody that's not really familiar with Rebelo and why I created it, I developed Rebelo just over 8 years ago, or had the idea for it when my wife was pregnant with my son Wyatt. I decided that I'd already been sculpting for about 2 years, customizing toys, and I was just starting to get bigger and make larger creatures that were looking more and more realistic. And when I made my first really big one, this guy was this was my very first Reaper that's in of the species that I've created, and I decided that this creature had to live somewhere. It had to be part of a super nerd. Yes, of course, had to be part of a bigger world setting. So I decided I would create a world that Wyatt and I could develop together as he got older. So Rebelo itself is Oliver backwards, which is his middle name. And as the world progressed, he added more and more to it. When I first started hand drawing the map, he was about 5 years old. He's like, I want volcanoes. So we drew in volcanoes, and thus the fiery pits were born. He created the concept for the very first creature from that area, the Bernadazi, which are a lizard man creature. He said, I wanted a lizard man, so I drew that, got his approval. Then I sculpted that piece out. He's come up with the idea for the chelonids, which are the fire turtles. He had the idea for the rock golem-like creatures, the basilites that are from that region. He's helped with the Pantheon of gods, especially with the idea that the Emberson, which is the god of fire and passion, is actually, his back is made up of the volcanoes, and he is in hibernation within the actual ground elements of the world. And from his idea of that, that's how kind of the story evolved, that all of the gods are currently in hibernation. And I talk more in depth about why they went into hibernation, or why they were cast into hibernation by the main god Creedona in the book, which that section is where I break down the different eras of the world and how it came to be. Really has been left very open-ended to allow stories to be told in all of the different eras as this project evolves and grows over time. And also as I eventually develop this out into role-playing game supplements so that other people can have the ability to tell their own tales and weave their own stories within the world that we've been fabricating. Now, aside from that, Wyatt's other involvement, he's had more say in some of the creatures and what they look like. I try to show him where I'm going with things and get his approval as I go. And I'm already getting influence from our 4-year-old Ruby, as she is getting more and more interest in adding to the world setting as well. So I'm sure within a year or two, there will be another continent that is just for her, and we'll start to introduce some of the species and characters that come from the land that she's helping to collaborate on as well. So then on to some of the other species. Let's see. This cat-like creature was a Thomason, and they also live in the floating forests. These have 6 legs. There are some stones that grow in their body that might have been provided by Dino in the chat. They have 6 eyes, and they often wear saddles on their backs if they have been domesticated by some of the other species. They have membranes underneath their legs that act almost like a flying squirrel as they jump and glide through the air from the treetops within the floating forest. A lot of the early inspiration that I would get as I was developing creatures and species for the world, we would end up watching a lot of like the BBC Earth shows, and there was one specific series that I can't remember the name of, where it tracked species as continents divided and seeing how they evolved slightly differently from location to location. And that's had a large impact on especially my main species, the Reapers, and how they've kind of evolved as they started out in the Icy Divide, and how some of them branched out and the tribes split and moved along to the different regions of Rebelo, and how some look very similar, yet then there's some, especially the ones in the tropical region, the Reapers of the Coral tribe, that look so different. And they've just adapted to being in that tropical climate, and how different they are from the other ones. Even so much so that they don't have the arms that the other Reapers have. As for anybody that is just now joining into the Kickstarter Live or the Facebook Live, I'm here just chatting about my current book project that is for pre-orders currently on Kickstarter. We have 13 days left to go. We've been going for about 8 days, and we're just over $6,000 with the goal of $7,000 to be able to go to press on this book, which I'm sure we're going to get to, and hopefully before this weekend is up. So I've been talking a bit about the inspiration behind doing this world building, the species that are involved, the regions that are here. If anybody has any thoughts or questions along the way, please throw them into either the Facebook or the Kickstarter live chat. So talking a little bit about the about what's going to happen after the art book, because the Creature Collection Volume 1 isn't where it's going to stop. I am, aside from just doing that, I do conventions on a regular basis. This year I'm going to be at MegaCon. I will not have my own booth, but I will be having a handful of my pieces in Norse Foundry's booth, and I'll be helping work their table with that. I will be working at the Georgia Renaissance Festival 2 days at the end of April. I'll be doing a live sculpting there, which is going to be very exciting. They invited me to come and actually demonstrate and show people the process that I do and introduce folks to my world. After that, I will be going to Origins in Ohio, which is in June. That is a great smaller gaming convention. I'm actually going to be, aside from having my art booth there, I will also be running 2 Fate games at the convention. One set in the fiery pits of my world and one set in the icy divide. It's going to be very limited spots with, I think, 4 players. 4 or 5 players. So if anybody is going to those shows and wants to be in, let me know and I'll see what I can do prior to the slots being opened by the show. I'm doing the exact same thing for Gen Con. And both of those games that I'm running are games that I've been developing with Norse Foundry, some modules that we'll be releasing as well later in the year. So I'm looking at releasing about 6 different modules for Rebelo that'll be for 3 different gaming systems, for Fate, for D&D 5e, and for Pathfinder, where it'll introduce people to some of the creatures. There'll be 5 monsters from my world in each one with the stats and write-ups about each one, as well as magical items. I've got my friend Nelson helping me with a lot of the writing. I've got my friend Ken helping me with some of the stats, and I'll probably even have I might see if my friend Doug will help edit as well, and my wife Carrie is adding in with a lot of the writing, as she has been helping with the book writing as well. I first had her come in as editing, and then she started adding more and more to the story, and she is definitely co-writing the book with me now. So there's a lot in the Rebelo front, especially as 2018 continues. Oh, along with those campaign supplements, I'll also be releasing a role-playing game campaign setting for the Fate system. Fate uses an open gaming license, so I'll be able to use their rule set and put out a book so that anybody can tell stories within my world before this year is out. Again, if anybody in the chat, either Kickstarter or Facebook, has any questions, please hit me up. Hey, Randy, it's good to see you. This is from the Kickstarter chat. Where do you get your inspiration from? You know, it's weird. A lot of times I will just start with circles and just start doodling. But most of the bases that I start with are a styrofoam base that you would get from a taxidermy shop. So I order 5, 6 styrofoam heads at one time, and I'll get them and I'll sit them in front of me and I'll look at the form and I'll start to doodle and start to draw and just kind of see where it goes. As this book has gotten further along and I've been like, okay, I've got all these regions. I have 1 creature in this region. Why don't I have more? I'll think of that as I'm doing it. It's like, wow, I need definitely something a little more swampy to fit in the marsh area. So I'll think of that as I'm drawing. But generally, I just kind of let my imagination go where it wants to go when I start to doodle, knowing that the styrofoam base isn't like the be-all, end-all of form that it needs to be. I can cut away from it. I can add to it. I don't really want it to look like whatever the skin that was supposed to go over top of it was supposed to be like. Then, of course, playing a lot of D&D, reading a lot of comic books, watching all the 80s movies growing up has heavily influenced all the work that I do. I mean, you can't not absorb all the pop culture that you grew up on and have it kind of come out, at least in little bits of familiarity as you go. Dino in the Facebook chat says, so cool to hear your thought process. Thank you, Dino. Yeah, and a lot of times with that, especially with the styrofoam bases, I'll sketch out 1 or 2 ideas, maybe 3 ideas, till it gets right. And then some other times, I'll just take a piece of styrofoam and I'll just start sculpting. Like I started live streaming one earlier this week where I didn't have a real concept for it. I decided to create the eyes, and I just started going to town to see where the sculpting would take me. But mainly because that was one that didn't really have any end. It didn't have to be in the book because the book is pretty much ready to go. We're doing some rewriting. Carrie's doing some rewriting now, and then I've got to send it out to Doug to have the final edits done. And then any new creatures that get added from the $1,300 pledge level on the Kickstarter. But the book is almost ready to go to press. So this sculpture was just, I haven't sculpted in a couple of months, and just me relaxing and being able to do what I needed to do with that. Thanks, Nelson. Thank you for agreeing over in the Facebook chat. So sometimes other inspiration will be just like I was saying just a little while ago. For a while, we were watching a lot of like the BBC Earth and some of those different nature shows that will then have influence on some of the creatures. Especially, you can see a handful of my species have like rings of fur and like ringtails and things like that. In one of the TV series we were watching, there were a lot of ring-tailed creatures, and then that started popping up in my work. You can see on Doralt, the Carcathian hanging up higher on my wall. Hey, Russ, what's happening? Thank you, sir. I will always continue with the rock. If you see that texture that's underneath of it, it's very much like texture that you would find on an older couch. And that was influenced. I have a canvas print in my house of Greg Simpkins painting, and in that is a piece of furniture with that style of furniture. And I saw that, and I was like, all right, that is going on the creature. So you pull little bits and pieces from everywhere, and that all just kind of gets added in to little bits and pieces that you might not realize is influencing the work. Tends to be there. Also, a lot of Dr. Seuss growing up. There's some of the whimsy that you can see in some of the faces and some of the eyes, I think is definitely attributed to that, or Henson as well. Anyone else have any questions about any of the creatures or the book or anything that's going on with that? So for the materials that I use, I've had some interest in doing some more magic items and weapons. So I'm probably going to be doing some more. I might do another hammer that might not be quite as magical. Maybe one that still has some eyes inset, like the Hammer of Grunthar, but might be something that might be able to make a handful of and figure out which species in Rebelo has crafted those. Because the original Hammer of Grunthar was created by the Sorcias, which are the mole people that live in the tunnels of the Waiju Desert. Hey, Melissa, in the Kickstarter chat, the pinkish cat fox creature, it looks amazing, and my toddler has chosen that as her favorite. Well, that is Thalia, and Thalia there's a lot more to her story. This book, this creature collection, is more of a bestiary where it talks about the species and their place in society, as opposed to individual characters and the stories that are being told within the world. So there's going to be more about her, but I can't really reveal that yet. I'm working on storylines as we speak, and working with some folks to try and see what can come with that. But keep your eyes peeled for Thalia, because her species is very rare within Rebelo. There are very few of her kind there, and she has quite a few special properties to her. And she's probably one of the favorites. She will be one of the favorites of many, I think, once more folks know what's going on. Yes, indeed, mysterious, just like a cat or fox. And the gem on her forehead is magical as well. Oh, you haven't? Okay, so over in the Kickstarter chat, Nelson says he hasn't seen the wisdom teeth. He loves the items of Rebelo. So wisdom teeth were a smaller piece that I had around at a handful of conventions, and I may have one or two left where I sculpted 13 teeth, made a little silicone mold of them, and then poured and cast them out of resin, then had to hand paint all of these 13. I then put them into a little tin with a folded up piece of paper that had printed on it the story of wisdom teeth. And it's almost like a magic 8-ball where you ask the question, you take the teeth and you throw it down, and whatever lands inside of there, you consult and be like, okay, 10 of them landed in. This is the answer to my question. Those are probably going to go a little bit further, maybe later this year, depending on how things go, and see if I can get those manufactured as opposed to doing them by hand. Because doing 13 little castings by hand takes quite a bit of time, and it's although I love them, if I could find a way, I'm working with Norse Foundry about possibly mass producing them on a little bit larger scale. It'll also probably drop the price down on them a bit, because having to do it by hand takes quite a chunk of time. But there are lots of little things that will eventually evolve within Rebelo, little trinkets and like things like the watchful eyes that are magical eyes that keep an eye on your belongings, or the pinchers of protections that are considered lucky if you were able to take a pincher from one of the spider-like Salzarite creatures if you live to tell the tale. So there will be lots of little trinkets like that sprinkled in, especially throughout the convention season. Oh, earlier I talked about some of the conventions that I was going to, being MegaCon, Origins, Gen Con, the Georgia Renaissance Festival for a weekend. I will also be doing Dragon Con, and I will be partnering with Norse Foundry at their booth. And I will also be doing a LOX Con this year for the first time, which isn't so much a convention, more so a conference for illustrators and imaginative realism artists. And they have the main show, which is filled with really fantastic artists, which I'm not in, but they have on Friday and Saturday a showcase tables, and I will be presenting my work there at the showcase tables up in Pennsylvania, which is going to be exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of seminars and things that I'll be able to go to learn. And last year they had a giant sculpting session where a bunch of different sculptors collaborated on a piece, which I'd love to be able to be a part of that, because some of those sculptures are just unbelievable. Dino, you love the trinkets? Thank you. Yes, I do too. I just having little bits and pieces as though I've actually traveled to Rebelo and come back with some of the treasures and prizes, I think adds a lot of flavor to the world. And especially the coin set, and I haven't written down the what each of the coins represent as far as the currency, but I'm sure that is going to I will put that in, and I may have to actually work that into the book before it's all done, just so that everyone has a better idea. Like the Coctoralis coin is worth more than this coin, so that everybody really has a good idea as to what the value of those are. And then also, if we start getting enough interest in that, I may release lots of those coins. So like if you just wanted a package of just this one coin as opposed to another, that may be something that could be available if enough folks are interested. But one of the things that I'm doing for the books that I just started printing out today is inside the one of the higher level tiers there. Oh, pull it over closer. Are going to be these inset drawings that have the Rebelo Creature Collection Volume 1 logo down at the bottom. I'm about to start drawing on those. I haven't decided yet if they're going to be straight pencils or if I'm going to start inking them as well, but they're all going to be of species that are currently in that volume of the book. Dino says, yes, it does. Lots of folks here excited about the coins. Excellent. All right, I'm very glad to hear that. And Nelson says, more people need a bone mask. Did you already say what they are? Oh, I did not say what the bone masks are. I will stand by. I'll grab a bone mask if you don't mind. So the bone masks, a lot of the different species now wear them, but the bone masks themselves were originally conceived by the Dryadamists. No, I'm sorry about that. They were conceived. Why am I all of a sudden losing my place? They were conceived by a species that lives inside the Forest of the Dead. When the forest first started losing all of the life inside of it, and the god that is trapped there began sending out emissaries to bring that which was living to her to feed on their life force. This species created a bone mask when they realized that the mask itself would hide their appearance from these vessels that this god was sending out. So now a lot of the creatures, it's become part of the main culture, not so much those that even travel into the Forest of the Dead, but even so far as like the Carcathians started wearing bone masks to make them look tougher and more menacing than they were, because by nature, their species is very gentle. But this is one of the bone masks that I made for a class where I was teaching silicone mold making and resin casting. That was the original mask, and this mask is in the book as well, where it goes into more talks about the symbolism of the bone masks and what they're used for to avoid the unliving within the Forest of the Dead, if anybody wanted to try and have safe passage through. Thank you for mentioning that, Nelson. I really appreciate that. That's one of the magic items. Another one of the magic items is a creature. Hey, thank you, Randy. I'm glad you love the bone masks. I've thought about possibly redoing the mold on that and casting those as a regular item, but I haven't quite decided yet. Possibly for later on in the convention year. There's a couple other items in the back of the book in the magic items section. Hey, Tony. Yes, you and your daughter do have a bone mask they created. It was awesome to have you guys at the class. Thank you very much. That was from the Kickstarter side of the chat. Gen Con, Randy? Randy would like to see the bone mask at Gen Con. I'll see what I can do about that. Randy makes some amazing leather items, and look forward to seeing him every time at Gen Con, especially seeing how he's pulling the leather to give the textures of faces with inset eyes and teeth. It's very, very good work. So the bone masks were originally just as a way to try and avoid these unliving that were trying to snatch up whatever was in the Forest of the Dead. And now other creatures pay for the bone masks, and then other folks within different regions of the world that would never have any interaction with the Forest of the Dead. It's kind of bled out into society and means a lot more to different cultures. So throughout this book, it really delves into the different societies that happen to be there and what makes up the world of Rebelo. So we have, I'm going to stream for another 12 minutes till 9:30 for an hour mark of the video. After that, I may do this again next Thursday. We have 13 days left on the Kickstarter campaign. We are so close to getting funded. If anybody out there is watching that hasn't pre-ordered the book and is interested, go ahead and do it now, just so that it can let me sleep easier at night. And once I know that we've funded for the pre-orders, that definitely means that I can actually go to press, get these all printed. It's so close to the files being finalized. There's not going to be a long wait time from when the Kickstarter ends to when it actually goes into production. I wanted this to be a book that I could have this year at my conventions, because I want to, I was talking about it last year at conventions, passing out postcards, getting folks excited about it. I'm ready for this to be part of what I'm able to interest people in when I'm at shows. And then as soon as this starts hitting people's hands and everybody's actually able to have a copy of the book, then I will be putting out the role-playing game book for it for anybody that's interested in playing in the world setting. The the book itself is being published by Norse Foundry, who has years of experience in the gaming industry, and they've been a fantastic partner. and I look forward. We're going to make tons of crazy things over the next couple of years. We already have a really great pipeline figured out of different projects that we're going to do and things that we already have in the works and in production. So you're going to get to see a lot of fun stuff from Rebelo as the next couple of years go by. Let's see, a couple other things. Oh, if you are in the West Georgia area and you order the book, there is going to be a free shipping option where I'm still lining up details, but I'm going to have an event where you will be able to pick up the book there. That way you don't have to pay for shipping once it's all over. Hang on, we got a question over in the Facebook chat from Nelson. Do you think there are species in Rebelo that are unknown? Yes, because I haven't come up with them yet. There have to be tons and tons of species, and there would be some that haven't been documented, because there are historical books within Rebelo, but there aren't that many of them because there aren't that many species that keep the logs of the history. Excellent. That would be a great time for a road trip, Dino. There's going to be tons of species that haven't been discovered. And once things start to get once we start to feel like, okay, there are so many species on Rebelo, that's when Ruby's continent will be introduced, and we will discover the species that happen to live there and figure out where the Outlanders are from, because they could be from Ruby's continent, or they could be from a completely different area that is part of the world setting itself. So there's lots of options for this to continue to grow. The book itself is called Creature Collection Volume 1. I don't have any intention in it only being a one volume book. I would definitely like to see this at least be 3 tomes of critters, because I think it would look much more impressive on a shelf if we have Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. How long that takes to do, there's some creatures in here in this first book that I created 8 years ago when I first started sculpting and concepting the world of Rebelo. But the species have really accelerated over the past 2 years as I've been going to more shows, as I've been selling more, as I've really been tying the world together in a more cohesive way. It's just, it feels like there's so many more stories that could be told. Excellent, Dino. Thank you. In the Facebook chat, he says 3 swoon about the 3 different volumes of Creature Collection. I think that's what I'm going to aim for, and see if we can fill up those tomes. And if there's roughly around 35 creatures / magic items in this first volume. So, and there's creatures that I've created that aren't in this book. Carrie, which shows are you hitting this year? You forgot. So I've got MegaCon Origins, MegaCon in Florida in May, Origins in June in Ohio, the Georgia Renaissance Festival, April 28th and 29th, Gen Con, the very beginning of August, Dragon Con, the very end of August, very beginning of September. So there's and also a LOX Con, which I keep forgetting because that's more of a really very specific show. That is in October. And that is I think that's going to be plenty, because that's with that show schedule, the current products that we have in the pipeline and the timelines for everything, all the art and writing that's going to need to be done. It's going to keep me busy. Excellent, Nelson. Nelson in Kickstarter in Facebook says he can't wait for book 1. I can't either. Melissa, anything close to Virginia you'd love to find and go to one? I think Pennsylvania LOX Con's probably going to be the closest one this year. I've heard really good things about, I don't know, Virginia is a very long state. I've heard really good things about Awesome Con, and Awesome Con is in DC. In the Kickstarter chat, which one is LOX Con? LOX Con is LOX Con, IX. That is the Imaginative Realism Conference that is really a lot more conference for artists and then art show where I will on Friday and Saturday be having tables in the showcase. But then I'll also be learning more as I go as well. And there's also a really big area for the really high end fantasy and speculative realism artists. So that one I'm very excited about. Last year I missed out on getting a table to that because I was not fast enough. This year the tables for that sold out in 43 seconds. I was very lucky to be click, 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 and ready to go when it happened. And a lot of my friends go to a LOX Con, and I'm excited to get to go and see what that's all about. But I'm not sure of any others, Melissa, in near Virginia. If you hear of any that you think are good, let me know, because I will definitely check them out. What does speculative mean? I think Carrie's just messing with me at this point, as I hear a chuckle from the other room. So we have about 4 minutes left for this stream. Does anybody have any other questions so far about anything with the book or the coins or the world of Rebelo itself? What species is my favorite from Nelson? Gosh, I don't have. It's hard for me to really pick a favorite. Like I have a favorite current sculpture, but it's hard for me to really say. And Andrea says, "Good luck at a LOX Con." Thank you very much. I don't know. My favorites tend to change as they go. Like I really like the Groblins because of their role in society and the world, but then I also really like the Reapers because the blue Reaper that I've created was the very first sculpture that was the foundation for everything that's come from Rebelo. And then at the same time, I really love the Bernadazzi and the Chelonids because those were ideas that Wyatt, my son, came up with. Thank you, Dino. Dino saying all of us are really excited for this project. I really appreciate that. And Carrie in the Kickstarter chat says Reapers hands down. Reapers are definitely one of the most interesting and I think unique species. Since all of the creatures from Rebelo are creatures that are not from anywhere else, those I think, since they're what started it all, they will always have a very special place in my heart. Again, if there's anybody either in the Kickstarter chat or the Facebook chat that hasn't checked out the Kickstarter page itself, watch the video of me talking about the project, or even a little bit further down, there's a 3-minute, 48-second video documentary that Eric from Zoom Out Media made of me, where I kind of talk about all of this. It's a really good look into how all this came about. Please give it a look and back the project if you're thinking about it. If you plan on backing it, go ahead and back it now. Just so the more people that back it early on, there's a consumer confidence that goes with it that other people want to back somebody that's already winning. Melissa will do. I know there's one in Vermont that your guy wants to go to in November. So many games there. Can't remember the name. Huh. Yeah, I've never seen any or heard of any that are in Vermont. So with let's see. I'm glad. Thank you very much. I'm glad everybody's excited about it. I'm thrilled. It's the project's going really well, and I can't wait to see where it goes to. With that, I'm going to call it a night. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to hit me up through any of the social media channels. Excellent. Thank you, Nelson. Oh, and for anybody that knows, the money doesn't actually come out until the end of the campaign of anybody's account. And if it doesn't fund, it doesn't come out at all. So if we don't hit that $7,000 mark, it won't come out. But I'm pretty confident we're going to get there. Today, even Gen Con tweeted about it, and Gen Con's got a pretty big Twitter following. So again, for everybody that's come in tonight and chatted and asked questions, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Melissa, for the best of luck on the campaign. Everybody, you guys are all awesome. Have a great evening, and I will talk to you all again soon. Thank you.